Buongiorno, everyone. How's it going, everyone? Happy Tuesday. Is it Tuesday? I don't even know what day it is anymore. I don't even know what day of the week it is anymore. I am so into Olympicsville. I don't even know what day it is. I honestly was at the, who's in here, first of all? I want to know who's in here and what's the one event, if any, what's the most favorite event that you've had from the Olympics so far? What's the favorite sport? What's the favorite moment that you saw? And is there a moment that you're waiting for over the next week? We only have 7 days left of the Olympics, so I want to know name, obviously, and then I want to know what has been your favorite. Me and my sister's kids call this peak and pit. So what is your peak over the last, since the Olympics has started, what's been the favorite thing for you to see? Sadly enough, if I were to pick mine, I think I say sadly because it's non-sports related. It's Andrea Bocelli. Of course, mine's Andrea Bocelli. That's been my favorite moment so far. So I want to know your favorite moment so far in the Olympics, and what is a sport or something that you're waiting for it to come over the next 7 days. So we are live here. I am back in Milan. So we are on the home stretch. We're on the home stretch. And what that means to everyone on the line here right now is this is the last apartment that I'm in, which means we're not going to be late from here on out. This was the last apartment or setup that we had to get through. So that is very, very exciting news. That is my pit of the Olympics, is changing so many hotels. So we have to figure out angles. Min couldn't figure out what he was going to wear. That's what the holdup was. So anywho, let's see. Okay. Buongiorno, Robert. I'm a sucker for curling. Okay. Robert, I want you to look up, if you haven't heard yet. Apparently, my friend sent me last night, the Canadians are cheating at curling. They're doing a double tap, which apparently after you release it, you're not allowed to touch it again. And they have from multiple different angles. Our sweet friends, the Canadians, were cheating. They were tapping it again very lightly with their fingers. So there's a lot of drama in the curling world right now. So, okay, I saw the Bernese Mountain Dog you were talking about. Hold on. Wait, how did you see him? Kirsten, are you up here? Are you up here? Yes, but Bernese Mountain Dogs are super cute. And I saw him several times before I left. So I really appreciate everyone has been so wonderful about in this series, kind of ebbing and flowing with all the changes for the Paris Sales Olympics. We obviously had no hotel changes, so no problems. And for this one, I've had to basically been going to a remote ski lodge. Tom Beam. Who's Tom Beam? Is that an Olympic athlete? Hey there. It says LinkedIn user. Hey there. I don't know who the LinkedIn user is. So I want to hear your favorite sport or the favorite Olympic moment that you've had so far. I have to say, ouch, cheating in curling. I know. What a weird sport to cheat in, too. You know what I'm saying? It feels like, oh, he was on TV. No, you're kidding me. Okay, that's really cute. That's really cute. So the Bernese Mountain Dog was on TV. Yeah, what a weird sport to cheat in for curling. My favorite moment has definitely been Andrea Bocelli was certainly a great moment. I loved Skeleton. So if y'all haven't had the time, go and watch Skeleton. And then last night in the pairs, look up the German couple, their figure skating in the pairs last night. They really, really nailed it. Was really, really interesting to watch. So why don't we go ahead and jump in the content since we're already late for today. The topic that we have today is, again, a very spicy topic. I always say that. But this is a part 2 to the meatiest topic that we have on deck so far. By the way, I was trying to pick which windows to showcase here. Maybe that's the view tomorrow. That one's better, right, man? There are windows all around, and I couldn't figure out how to get them up. That's what was taking so long. It's kind of like The Purge, if you've seen that movie. The wire grates were writing up, holding back beautiful Italy for me. But the topic today is discovery questions that an AE should be asking and should be avoiding. So in part 1, we really went into the goal of discovery questions, what you're trying to do, the 2 types of value that you can ask and find in discovery, and how to essentially find that. And then we ended with leading off the conversation what are the overview questions that you can ask, and what are the driving impact questions you can ask to lead the conversation. So can you tell me a little bit about blank? Can you help me understand blank? Can you walk me through blank? But getting them to give you an overview of a general conversation. That was the French flag. Okay, no more distractions. Kirsten, no more distractions with the dog, the cute dog. Okay, so we're going to jump into lap number 1. This is going to be a really technical session. Full disclosure, this is probably going to be the meatiest, most technical session that we have so far. So I know that we went into, in one of the opening episodes, we went into what the difference was between root cause, business problem, tactical problem, impact, all of that criteria. So the first lap I wanted to lead with is, what is the difference between a business problem, tactical problem, and root cause questions that you can ask? So full disclosure, for a business problem, you can essentially find both ambits. And I want to give a definition of what each of these are first, and then what questions you should be asking. So business problem is, again, attached to the lagging indicator of the buyer persona. So that's the final metric that they're hired and fired to drive. And, we could use hockey for an example today. So hockey, the final lagging metric that they're hired and fired to drive is going to be goals scored. So essentially the business problem is the size of the delta between where they are currently with that lagging indicator and what's the goal internally. So in this case scenario, it would be, how far are they behind in the game? So let's say that the US is behind France. The US is behind France. I don't even know if we play if we play ice hockey. Let's say they're behind France from 4-2. So the business problem is 2 goals that they would have to score essentially to make it that delta. So the 2 questions to ask to find the business problem, it's very simple, is for their lagging indicator for a buyer persona, you have to ask, what is the goal internally? And where are you at currently? Those are the 2 questions to find the business problem. So I'm using the use case for people who have kind of followed along quite a bit. I'm using the use case today of a negative symptom-based master problem. So there's 12 different types of master problems. They differentiate dependent on the outcome that you're trying to achieve. But the most common one is the negative symptom-based, which means there's a certain amount of pain that's egregious according to the lagging indicator that they're trying to solve. Now, why they're trying to solve it is the impact, but they're trying to solve essentially that egregious impact. So within inbound, for instance, you can't find something unknown when it comes to pain. Pain is subjective. So essentially what that means is pain is always going to be the differential between the lagging indicator goal and the lagging indicator achievement. You don't win credibility there because everyone knows their lagging indicator goal and everyone knows their lagging indicator achievement. Like there's no secret to that. So you can't add credibility there. But those are 2 very important questions to ask so that you can uncover what is the objective marker that we need to hit to alleviate the impact, essentially. Now, even if you hit that, you might not alleviate the impact, and your expertise comes in, and knowing that won't help them avoid the impact. So let's say, so to speak, that the reason that they want to win against France, they're down 4-2, and the reason they want to win against France is the coach is afraid that if he loses one more game, he's going to be fired. So let's say that they do win against France. They pull it off and they go 5-4, but the coach still gets fired. That's an example of you solved the business problem, but you didn't solve the master problem because the impact still incurred. So it's important to know everything that they believe, because you can add value around knowing of like, okay, how many games has he lost in the past? What was the record beforehand? What is the record now? How many conversations has been had with him with upper management. So you might be able to size up on that alone, like, hey, bro, even if we pull this off 5-4, he's still gonna get the axe. So that's a way where you're kind of sizing up what is actually the reality of the situation versus what do they think about the situation. So that's a business problem question. How those differ between root cause and tactical problems is, well, some trap questions. I wouldn't ask, how much do you want? Where do you want to go? One of the biggest holes or errors where modern theology or like modern sales methodology doesn't hold water, I'm going to say in my opinion and be nice, but objectively speaking, it doesn't hold water. Almost, I'd say 99.9% of it is people say it's where you are to where you want to go. And technically the wording is correct, but you can't ask someone, where do you want to go? How much quota attainment do you want? How many goals do you want to score? Let's see if anyone can guess what the downside is with that. If I said, how much quota attainment do you want? I know that you've hit 200K. I want you to jump in the chat. If I were to ask you the question, how much quota attainment do you want? What would your response be? So one of the holes there is it's not how much do you want, because then you just start talking in ideal case scenarios. It's what is the internal goal that you have to hit. That's an important piece. For the tactical problem and root cause questions, the only questions that you can objectively ask is what is that? So again, tactical problem is according to leading indicator, root cause is according to leading indicator. You can ask them, where is that indicator at? But you cannot ask them, where does it need to go to hit the business problem? That is your expertise. So it's an important call out. For business problem, you can ask both of those. What is lagging indicator goal and what is lagging indicator achievement? If you haven't asked those two questions, you don't have the size of the business problem. An important side asterisk note, it's not how much lagging indicator do you want, because then you're just going to get ideals. How much server uptime do you want? How much gross profit margin do you want? Yeah, there. Look at it. Kirsten nailed it. I'm like, how much? What's important about her response is I said, how much quota attainment do you want? And Kirsten said 500% or more. You start talking in ideals, and I didn't lead her there. You know, like you start talking in ideals, I don't know, 1 billion, 5 billion, and then you still are left without the business problem. So every sales methodology underneath the sun is going to tell you that it's about where you are to where they want to go. And technically the wording is correct, but where they want to go is to solve the problem. And solving the problem isn't an ideal state. It's not the ideal future state. It's what is the state at which solves the problem they're trying to solve. So it's a very important difference and distinction. So I would ask them, what is the goal internally of their lagging indicator, not how much of it do they want, because then you'll get responses like Kirsten. So business problem questions, you have to ask those two questions. If you don't ask them, you don't have the size of the business problem. Root cause and tactical problem questions, the only question that you can ask is, what is this leading indicator? What is the state of this leading indicator? And your expertise comes in when you realize how much of that leading indicator or how much of that leading indicator would they need to be able to hit their goal of their lagging indicator. So let's say, you know, let's pick sales just to be simple for simplicity's sake. And the business problem would be, you know, what's your quota and what's your quota for the year, and then what's your quota attainment so far? There's the business problem. Voila. Let's say they say 200K and their goal internally is 500K for the year. Their tactical problem and their root cause questions that I can ask is, for a tactical problem, let's start there. What's your conversion rate from SQL into SAL, for instance? What's your conversion rate from SAL into closed won, for instance? So let's say that they say currently it's at 3%. I can't then ask them, what percentage does it need to be to hit your quota attainment? You can, but you'll look like a complete noob, number one, and it'll be very, very clear that you can't add value. You should be able to do the math of what percent conversion. So the next thing, let's see if anyone can guess this one from a technical perspective. If I knew the conversion is 3% into closed won, from SAL into closed won, and I knew the quota was the quota was 200. Quota attainment was 500, or sorry, quota attainment was 200K, but the quota was 500K. What is the one number that I would need to understand, if you don't change anything currently, how they can be successful? What's the data outlier that you would need to know? You know the conversion rate. You know they're at 200K, and you know that they have a 500K quota in front of them. What's the one thing that you would need to know to size up, are they going to be successful? So I'm going to give everyone some time, but the point is, the only thing that you can do for tactical problem and root cause questions is ask them the status currently of a leading or leaning indicator. And what you're sizing up in your brain is which one of these is really far behind, which one of these do we need to change, and which one of these do we need to change by a lot, a little, etc., to be able to hit that business, that business problem, that lagging indicator. So I'm gonna let's hit on time here. Yeah, size. Average deal size. Give it up for Kirsten. Average deal size. I would need to know what is the average deal size to understand how much. Everyone for real. Give it up for Kirsten. I would need to know how big is the sale to be able to understand if I have a 500K quota and they're at 200K currently, and I know I'm at a 3% conversion. I've got all those pieces, but what I don't have is how big is each sale. So if each sale is $1,000, then I know how many initial meetings that I need. If the deal is $5,000, that cuts that number in fifths, essentially. So everyone for real, give it up for Kirsten. That's the data point that I would need to know. Here's what's important. Discovery is about finding out what those pieces of information are. Right? So you are acquiring information so you can discover how they should go about solving their problem. Is their problem solvable? And what do they believe that's not true about solving their problem that they should change? So, and what you're doing is you're sizing up all of these pieces. If they told me, for instance, that their conversion into closed won is 50, I'm like, I don't believe it. So I'd ask some more questions. But then they told me that their average deal size was $500 and that the percentage of the time that they discount is 90. All of a sudden, I'm like, I got to get them to stop discounting and I've got to raise my average deal size. If they were to tell me that they never discount and their average deal size is 50K, I mean, it'd be dependent upon the setup, but their conversion rate was 2%, then I'm like, okay, either pricing might be too high. Discovery is almost always going to be a problem. So my pricing might be too high. And discovery, I've got to look into discovery calls, and I want to look at product market fit. Are there competitors? How much the market has been eaten up? Is it a legacy brand? Da, da, da. So it changes the questions that I would ask because it changes the way that they would solve it. So the questions that I'm asking kind of in review for business problem is for their lagging indicator, for your buyer persona, what's the goal and what's the achievement? And then for the tactical problem and root cause elements, I can only ask what are the status of them. Where your expertise comes in is knowing what's the industry average and at what point they cause a problem and knowing which ones they should change to be able to hit that number. So if I were to ask someone, what's your conversion rate to close one? And they were like, it's only 6%, it's super low. I'm like, well, there's a belief, but I'm like, it depends on if it's inbound or outbound. So I'm like, how many initial meetings do you have? Well, we usually have about 100, a 10 per month that are sent to us. I'm like, okay, so they're sent from a BDR? Yeah, they are. What's the source of them? Meaning, are they inbound? Are they postbound? Are they outbound? What's the split of those? And they're like, well, maybe we get one inbound a month, but 9 of them are outbound. I'm like, actually, their conversion to close one, it's outbound. So it's 6%. So that's normal. Now, it doesn't mean we can't change it, but I'm asking all of these questions for background so I know how I would go about solving it. So I know what to recommend to them next about what they're assuming that's not real, right? So that's kind of the goal of those questions. But kind of as a summary, business problem is lagging indicator goal minus achievement. Those are the two questions I need to ask. Not where do you want to go? I think trainers mean well until if they deployed what they were telling you to do, they would see why the math doesn't add up. Be like, where do you want to go? To the moon, Brendan. I want 1 billion. What do I want my time in luge to be? 2 seconds. That's where I want it to go, hypothetically. If you're asking me like ideal case scenario, so it's just what is the actual internal goal? And then tactical problem root cause, you're asking questions about their indicators, the specific status of them currently. That is the only one that you can ask. On a side note, if they do say, we need to get our email open rate to 20, or they say an assumption, I need to understand why they believe that. I'm like, why do you say that? Because that's an assumption, and I might blow that up later. And I'm going to need the fact behind the belief to get there. So if they throw out, we need to get to this state for tactical problem or root cause, I'm like, why do you say that? Because I want the backing for it. I'm not saying why do you, the reason I'm asking why do you say that is not because I 100% believe them and I want to know their logic. I want to know their logic so that later, if and when I need to blow that up, I know the fact to attack. Okay, I told y'all this is technical. Let's go into lap 2. Lap 2. It's going to be as grueling as a snow process. Y'all, we are last department. So this is the last setup day. Okay, lab number 2, we're going to go into impact questions. So business problem, again, is the delta between the lagging indicator goal and achievement. The impact is what happens to them because that delta exists. So because that delta in gross profit margin exists, what happens to them? Because that for a CFO, because that server uptime delta exists, their goal is 99 and 3 nines, and they are only currently at 99 even. What happens to them? What happens because of that? What is the extended pain that happen and extended effects that have? That's Francis Flag. Extended effects that happens because that business problem exists. So there's 3 levels to this. There's persona. There's meaning, how does it affect them within their role, their team, and their personal life? There's horizontal, what happens to the teams laterally because that business problem exists? And then vertical, what happens to their leaders because that business problem exists? So it's essentially, what are the extended effects? Now, the driving impact, as we mentioned about, is which one of those is eventually when they move to solve it, which one are they primarily trying to solve? Now, maybe they need to solve 4 or 5, but it's which one in that moment, by solving it in that process, are they looking to solve? There's been a number of things as I've been going through this journey that I've had to solve all at once, but there's always one that takes precedence. For instance, I haven't returned my car yet. I hit the limit. The drop off was at 11 this morning. I hit the limit. There's extended pain because of that. Sure, I'm going to have to pay over. Maybe I have to pay an extra day because of that car. I haven't filled up the tank. Yada yada yada. But in the moment, it's stack ranking. Which one of these do I need to solve? Is it more important that I figure out an angle and figure out the Wi-Fi for this apartment, or is it more important that I drop off that car on time and so I don't incur the money? You would say the car, but without knowing the situation, you would say the car is more important. And you would also say the car is more costly. I'm going to incur some costs because that car is not turned in on time. However, because of the extended impact, that's what ranked Wi-Fi and the setup number 1. If I don't get this get this set up, we couldn't do the live stream. And it's like, we've been late for the last couple of days. So people are going to stop tuning in. People are going to think, oh, this is going to take forever. People are going to, on and on. We're going to start losing traction. Maybe people start talking more crap about me online. Like the impact could keep compounding and compounding and compounding. But the most important thing to me, for sure, it was a no-brainer, was focus on Wi-Fi and focus on this first. Why? Because of the priority of the matter. So it's like, that's how your prospects rank. They think about, which one of these do I need to solve first and why? So the driving impact is, what do they need to ultimately be able to do by changing something or solving something. So the ultimate thing that I needed to be able to do was to go on this live stream, with a decent sized background. Me and Min were about to let rip whenever I couldn't figure out how to increase these windows, like to get the grates up. I'm like, this looks like The Purge. I'm like, it's so dark in here. And I knew that it was a beautiful background in the background, but I couldn't figure it out. And we almost rolled without it. That I was like, screw it. That I was like, I can't figure it out. But then, last minute, it rings up. And the reason I was about to say screw it is, I'm like, we could still do the live stream without it. Now, is it ideal? No, but it's about prioritizing. Which one is less ideal? Starting 30 minutes late or having a little bit of grate in the background? And I'm like, starting 30 minutes late is way worse. So let's just roll without it until I figured out the button of how to do it. So your prospect is thinking in the same way that I am. There's 16,000 problems to solve. Which one do I solve and why comes down to the level of impact. So the impact questions that I would ask. So for the business problem, it's obviously the the delta, let's take a IT director. The IT director, the server uptime goal versus the server uptime achievement. So let's say that the current server uptime is 97%, and the goal is 99.29. So the first type of impact would be persona impact. How does that impact their role, and how does that impact their personal life? So personal life, full disclosure, I try to stay off of those indicators, but they're important to keep in the back of your mind. Meaning everyone's just trying to not get fired. That's essentially the punchline behind all of this. So from the personal perspective, it would be, how does this really impact his team on the IT team overall? So I would be asking questions like, how many outages have happened before? How egregious were those outages whenever they happened? When did the server uptime get to that level, for instance, of, like, you said it's a 97 recently, but how long has it been like that? So I'm not sizing up anything other than how much room do you really have to be offline right now? Meaning, if it's the first time that he's ever been offline, he or she has ever been offline, that they're like, well, normally we have 99.98% uptime, but we've had a recent bout of server downtime. I'm like, how long was it and how recent? And I'm going over the angle of who did it affect and why. So I'm sizing up from the persona level, how much room does he really have to go based on what's happened so far? For the lateral ones, that's more easy, or all of these are actually pretty simple. You just have to know your persona, and you'll get to know your persona over time. For the lateral ones, the horizontal impact, what I need to think through is who does this lagging indicator delta typically affect laterally, and what are their lagging indicators? So let's stay with the IT director. It's like, okay, if the servers are down, who would that affect? So I'm going to kick that out to the crowd. If the servers were down, what other teams would that affect internally in an organization? So I'll give one, and let's see if y'all can guess some other. So the one that I would say that it would affect is customer success. So if the servers are down, all of a sudden, clients can't get access to, let's say, their login or their portal or the products, et cetera, then all of a sudden it's going to decrease the amount of people that renew. So the customer success team is a high candidate. So the questions that I can ask is, for the lateral team that's affected, what is their lagging indicator goal, and what is their lagging indicator achievement? So, and I'm not asking them what are the ripple effects. It's probably my least favorite question prescribed on LinkedIn. What are the ripple effects of, I'm like, Brendan, if they know and they're correct, they don't need you, right? So I'm after, how is this impacting people in ways they don't know about? So I'd say, so your customer success team, if you don't mind me asking, how many people are on your customer success team? They're like, 2 people. That already changes it, 2 versus 600, right? That I'm like, okay, they only have 2 people in customer success. So when there's an outage, this is a very big deal. I'm like, what's the customer load? Yeah, okay, operations then. Operations, another team that would affect. Okay, who else would it affect? Robert jinged in with operations. So it would affect customer success. I mean, heck, I think that it would affect almost all teams. Marketing, of like, they can't get to your website. Sales, people can't contact sales or reach out to them. Anyone using a computer, yes. Operations, I mean, it would affect almost all teams internally. So it's like, okay, if the website goes down, let's say, for instance, then it's like, okay, then people can't even request to talk to the sales team. People can't even request a demo. People can't even request to download content. So it's like marketing's affected. So I'm after, ops, sales. See, there you go. Legal, if they're getting brilliant. Give it up for Kirsten. I didn't even think of that one. Of legal, they're getting sued because of SLA. I didn't even think of that one. I have goosebumps, Kirsten, that it's like, okay, so I'm asking, the questions that I would ask is, I'm like, okay, so legal would be impacted because of SLA. The first question I'd have to ask is, what is the SLA? How many SLAs have you broken? Have there been, what is the number, if any, of lawsuits that have come as a result of that? Now, I'd be asking these questions in measure. If they're like, we just had one recent downtime bout, and I'm like, it wasn't that bad, that I'm like, legal's probably out. They probably haven't gotten sued yet. And I'm going another direction. But I'm like, sales and because that's a longer tail effect. But sales and marketing for sure. But one of the questions, to her brilliant point, is SLA. What is the SLA that you have with clients? What percentage, how many customers, and what percentage of that SLA was broken? So you're really just doing and I would chart these out from the beginning, and the list can grow. The important thing is you're not asking, what are the ripple effects of, I'm like, shut up. We are so obvious in sales. They know exactly where we're going. But if I said, what's your SLA, if you don't mind me asking, and they don't know, that's a great sign. Meaning it's a great sign that they don't know that this could impact them. This could be impacting them. Maybe if enough of these lateral teams heat up, when legal's pissed because the SLAs, who are they going to come to? IT, because I'm the one that caused it, essentially. When customer success is churning all these customers, who are they going to get mad at? IT. Why? Because all their customers are churning because of the server uptime. So now legal wants me fired and customer success wants me fired. Enough of these heat up and all of a sudden there's movement. So things aren't linear, meaning they're not digital. Things build up over time in terms of pressure. It's kind of like almost like a dam. And after a certain amount of pressure, if a certain amount of pressure is held, then the dam breaks. So their role is the dam breaking. Right? So enough of these impacts, lateral impacts, and then vertical impacts, it's just their boss. So IT director, let's say they answer into CEO and it's a smaller firm. Then it's like, okay, now the IT director, it's like, how is that impacting the CEO? So what are the CEO's metrics, which would be, a growth. So it's like, well, because of the IT problem, it's impacting marketing, that they lost 500 SQLs because website is down. It's infecting customer success because they churned an increase of 20% of customers because of it. It affected sales because they couldn't even get a hold of the sales team for for 2 weeks at a time. So they churned, 75% of the revenue that they could have had in Q1 because of that outage. How do all three of those compound and affect the CEO? That's the vertical impact. So I'm not asking what's the impact to your CEO. We've got, in my opinion, and we're going to get in the next lap, we've got to stop focusing on what people are thinking about. We should start focusing on what people believe and is it true? And there's a very big distinction. If I'm just trying to manipulate someone, I'm after what are they thinking? Because I want them to think this. Versus what someone believes to see if it's true, it's what are they about to do? Because I want to prevent them from making a mistake. It sounds like a small difference, but the compounding effects of that goal are evergreen. So instead of being after, do they think they should solve this? And how could I get them to calculate out the cost of inaction so that they believe they should move forward? Or how do I get them to cough up the current state and the future state so that I can hold my anchor in pricing? I'm like, put your selfish crap motives down. Put it down for a second, okay? Just give it a rest and pivot to what is objectively the best thing to do next for this buyer. It might not be buying you. It might be buying more of you. It might be buying less of you. Overall, the effect of that, though, will only be positive in terms of your quota. I promise you. So my North Star is, how do I find things that they don't know about, of things that they're going to need to be able to solve this? So I take their goal I subsume it as my goal. And that is, in my head, in discovery. That's why I'm not asking the questions of what's the impact to you if you don't move forward, Bob? It's like, I'm trying to find, they don't realize that legal wants them dead because of this IT outage. So whenever I ask that, I'm not like, is legal mad at you? They're like, I don't know. And if they did already know, then there's no point to asking it. I'm like, and I'm not even asking, have they talked to you recently? I'm like, what is the SLA for your clients? How many clients do you have? That recent bout that you mentioned, how many SLAs were broken, if you don't mind me asking, in terms of volume and percentage? If they say 90%, I'm like, yeah, legal wants you dead. Legal's not happy, is what I'm thinking in my head. I'm like, I found an unknown. And in that case scenario, I found a misdiagnosis because they're not saying anything about it. And they're like, no, legal's completely cool with us. I'm like, well, we'll see about that. I'm like, how many SLAs were broken? They're like 90%. I'm like, yeah, they're lying. Behind the curtain, they want you dead because of what you just did. What you just did cause. So, okay, let's go into the next slide. 3-step process to find a misdiagnosis. This is going to be a fun one and probably a shorter one. I know I say that all the time, but hey, yesterday I was short. Okay, so 3-step process to find a misdiagnosis and a misdiagnosis is the next slide. That's why I'm saying it'll be short because I'll kind of combo them. A misdiagnosis, you are trying to find something that they believe that's not true. That's what you're not trying to do that, but meaning that's what's at stake. That's the goal of doing this. And in this, it's based off of something characteristically that they believe. They're like, I believe, they're like, oh, this is killing us, or no, legal's actually completely cool with everything that's been going on. We haven't heard anything from them. Or no, me and my, like, I'm just thinking of the silent passion aggression. It's like, no, me and my partner are doing fine. She or he hasn't brought this up. I'm like, well, you don't know that. You don't know that they're doing fine. Just because they're silent doesn't mean that they're doing fine. It doesn't mean it's not an issue, right? So the 3-step process is the first in misdiagnosis. So we're going to start with that. In misdiagnosis, I start with whatever they said that you believe is a candidate for that it's not correct, whatever they're saying. Sorry, this is bugging me. There we go. That's better. So if whatever they said that's a candidate that you don't believe that you believe that it potentially might not be true, you're asking them to define it. So if they're like, man, our day sales outstanding time is killing us, or our backup success rate is just killing us. So I'm like, interesting. So what is your backup success rate, if you don't mind me asking? So you're asking them to define it. Whatever they say is the cause or not the cause. And again, misdiagnosis, you can have a lot of beliefs. They're like, we're killing it comparatively against other SDR teams. I'm like, that is a self-diagnosis. Right now, it's a self-diagnosis. I'm like, we'll see. That's a self-diagnosis according to stack ranking. They think that they're ahead of other SDR teams. So the first question I would ask is, how many SALs, what is an SAL based on, if you don't mind me asking? And then how many SALs are you booking per month, outbound versus inbound and cumulative? So I'm asking them to define the data point. And let's say they say we're booking, or that they're booking 1 per month. Like, interesting. So the second step is, if it is a misdiagnosis, meaning it's not true, whatever they said, I say interesting. And they're like, why is it interesting? And then I correct their misbelief with a fact, with a statistic. So I'm like, well, for backup success rate, for instance, and I'm like, they're like, it's killing us. I'm like, interesting. I'm like, what is your backup success rate, if you don't mind me asking? They're like 92%. I'm like, interesting. And they're like, what do you mean by interesting? And I'm like, well, industry average is anywhere from 80 to 90% for backup success rate, but anything above 75% success rate is actually not the main contributor. It's not significant contributor to server downtime. So for the SAL example, I'm like, interesting. And they're like, why? And I'm like, well, industry average is actually, 2 to 3 for enterprise for booking. It's going to be anywhere from 3 to 4 for mid-market and SMB for booking for the industry average across the board. So anything below 2, and you're actually about 20 to 30% behind the industry average. So you're correcting them with a stat, or they're like, our network latency is killing us in terms of server uptime. Or let's do another one, transaction success rate, let's say for ahead of payments. They're like, our card not present decline rate is killing us. I'm like, what is your card not present decline rate? And they're like, it's 1%. I'm like, interesting. They're like, what's so interesting? I'm like, industry average is anywhere from 2 to 3%. Anything less than 5%, and actually card not present decline rate isn't significantly impacting your transaction success rate overall. So you are correcting what their belief, but the very important thing is that you're correcting it with a statistic, not an opinion, and that you know going into it the why they believe what they believe. Right? So number one, from the psych view of I want to attack the fact that supports it, not them as the believer. Number one. But number two, an interesting process happens when you go about it in this manner. When you correct with the stat, a lot of times they end up impacting or taking themselves over to the correct assumption before you even say it. They're like, well, so it's not card. They're like, it's not card not present decline rate. Maybe it's blank. Of like, they'll immediately make the correction themselves, which is a very empowering process. So whatever the misbelief is, the step one is I ask them to define it, whatever the candidate is. I ask them to define it. Step two is I correct them with the stat if it's a misdiagnosis. And step three, you can do one of two things. You can either go after another indicator that helps you confirm that it's truly a misdiagnosis, or you can go after an indicator that helps you diagnose what it truly is. So, if for instance, if I think they think that they're fine in terms of email deliverability, I'm like, interesting. I'm like, what's your open rate, if you don't mind me asking? And you can if you led with, for instance, a leaning indicator, then I usually pivot to leading second. So I'm like, what is your open rate, if you don't mind me asking? And they're like 30%. I'm like, interesting. I'm like, what do you mean by interesting? I'm like, 25% industry average is normal, but anything less than 50%, there's an email deliverability problem. 59% of emails are only being delivered to the primary inbox. So the first direction that I could go is one, to double confirm that email deliverability is an issue. So since I started with leaning, I would go to leading then. I'd say, do you have, meaning, since I started with the objective sign that email deliverability is a problem, I would then pivot to the inputs that would cause it to be a problem. I'm like, do you have DKIM, DMARC, SPF setup, et cetera. I'm expecting for them to say no. Why? Because I believe that they have an email deliverability problem. So if they did say no, then I'm like, okay, yeah, it's definitely email deliverability. If they say yes, we have them set up, then that calls into question your misdiagnosis, right? So it's back to the board. Now, if that's the first angle that you can go after, is you basically are double confirming that it is a true misdiagnosis. The other angle you can go is diagnosing what it truly is. So for instance, if in this case, same case scenario, they're like, email deliverability is killing us. And you're like, what is your open rate, if you don't mind me asking? They're like, our open rate 65%. I'm like, email deliverability is not a problem for them. Because I'm like, anything less than 50 is email deliverability. 65% open rate, I don't believe it's an email deliverability problem. Depending upon the size of the team. And so instead of going there, I want to, instead of double confirming, I go to find what the root cause actually is. So I'd say, can you give me an example? Can you show me an example of the email that you're sending over? Because I'm like, it might be quality. Or I'm like, for the last 100 emails, can you queue up, what are the subject lines? If you don't mind me asking, I'm like, it might be the subject line. Or, I mean, in this case scenario, it's 65% open rate. So I'm like, well, I'd still want to see the subject line, because I'm like, maybe it's like free puppies, right? So it's a misleading subject line. And then you get in the middle, it's like, what if I flip the script? And so it's like, I got the problem. You got a fine open rate. but your conversion rate into an actual booked meeting is low because it's a misleading subject line. But I'd say, generally speaking, that's not the case. So I would probably go, can you give me an example of the email? So again, kind of from the high level, with the misdiagnosis, the 3 steps are: when they say they believe something, you think it's a candidate for not being correct. First step is I ask them to define it. The second step is if it is a misdiagnosis, I correct them with a stat. And the third step, I can either ask a question to double confirms for me that the misdiagnosis is truly a misdiagnosis, or you can ask a question about the alternate indicator to figure out what it actually truly is. In the beginning, I would start with the double confirmation. Once you get confident, meaning you're accurate a good amount of the time, then I pivot to the latter. So this is over time. You're just going to get better and better and better over time. That I'm like, in the beginning, I would always go to the double confirmation, because you just want to make sure that you're actually saying something correct. So interesting is likely a better response than my usuals. So here's the funny thing is, I don't think that sales technique is a complete wash, meaning conversational technique. I just think it's a small, in comparison, relatively unimportant piece that is usually what most sales training focuses on. It's like, to Jay Frank's point of like, I need to just show just a 3-minute excerpt of this according to my intro to sales students at IU. Hi, Robert. How are you doing? They all want big bucks, but don't take notes. They need to see how deep this. Yeah. So, I mean, selling can be an extremely deep profession if it's off of buyer knowledge, right? But how it is, unfortunately, so kind of to Jay Frank's point, there is a certain amount of bedside manner in terms of how you say things that will help people open up to you with information, more or less. Like, that's just psychologically the fact. However, I view it as exactly that, meaning there's a certain amount of bedside manner that doctors need to have with a little kid when they're scared, to get them to calm down, to answer the questions that they need them to answer to be able to diagnose. Okay, explain to me what happened. Calm down. Did you said that you swallowed something. How much of it did you swallow? How many of these pills did you swallow, for instance? There's a certain amount of bedside manner of lowering your voice. Like, I think of my sister, is an ER doctor. She said one of the tricks that she uses is when everything is nuts in the ICU, that people are running around, blah, 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 that a trick that she learned how to do is she just calms down and she lowers her voice. She's like, Jay Frank, I need for you to walk over and get X, Y, and Z and pull this cart over, this crash cart over to here. And then we're going to start operating. Got it? And just her lowering her voice, she said everyone in the ER just stops and they lean in of like, what is she saying? That's a good example of bedside manner. However, a big, c'est pendant in French. However, if there's not expertise in the buyer on the back end, it means nothing. Meaning, I can lower my voice all I want, but if I don't know the statistics on the back end and the questions to ask them, it will mean nothing. Worst case scenario, the buyer believes you and they shouldn't have. So I'm like, and that's where most sales training starts, ends, lives, breathes, eats, and dies, is how to lower your voice or tone or pace or blah, blah. I'm like, all of that's fine and good. But the most important part is that we learn the statistics for the buyer. And if we can couple both of those, yes, I agree. But if we only have one of those, I'd say knowing the buyer stats is going to help more than anything. So I don't like helping, like, the sales technique, if you don't know the information, is actually really damaging. It can be really dangerous for a prospect. So, important side note, but yes, Jay Frank, I agree. I agree with you. Being like, you're wrong. I learned that doesn't help you have many friends. Okay, next lap, men. We're almost there. Okay, so that was okay, let me cover misdiagnosis for okay. He thought I was going to combo burrito him. I'm going to do probably 300 seconds on misdiagnosis, and then we're going to go into this second to last topic, or maybe it's the last topic. So misdiagnosis, it's the same type of process, but it's after something. A misdiagnosis is something you believe it's not true. A misdiagnosis is something you've missed entirely. So a misdiagnosis, how the candidates is something they said that you don't believe are correct, either based on the way that they said it, that people are normally wrong about it, that people are normally wrong. Like people say like 50% of people get divorced. I'm like, that's just not statistically true. That I'm like, okay, that's a candidate. That's a candidate for a misbelief. A misdiagnosis is something you miss entirely. So the symptom in this case is that they haven't mentioned it at all. Whereas the symptom in the first case is they've mentioned it, but what they've mentioned is wrong. You think is potentially wrong. So it's the same type process, but I start with, instead of getting them to define something that they said, I get them to define a data point that would qualify whether they have that problem or not. So in the email deliverability use case, for instance, I'm like, what's your email open rate, if you don't mind me asking? I'm not telling them, I think you may have an email deliverability issue, and so I'm going to ask you what your open rate is. I'm like, I can all the talk. I just ask them, what is your email open rate, if you don't mind me asking? If they're like 60, I'm like, interesting. Email deliverability isn't likely a problem for them, but I don't 100% believe it. Right. So I keep asking questions like DKIM, DMARC, SPF setup, blah, blah, blah. There's a certain amount of questions like, dang, they don't have one. But I'm not running my logic through them. So the first step is I'm having them define the data point that would tell me whether or not they have a problem. The second step is, and it's important to note that they will answer it with like clear doughy eyes because they don't know it. They don't know that they might not know the data point at all, and they don't know that it potentially is a sign of a misdiagnosis. So people say like, well, what happens if they don't know this data point back? And I'm like, then you dig for it. It doesn't matter if the patient, if you're like, what is, let's say the blood pulse, for instance. It doesn't matter if they don't readily have it. What matters is it you think causes a very severe condition, shows you they have a severe condition. So I'm going to go and do what I have to do to get to the data point. Why? Because I want to help them. So I'm like, what is this? The first step is to define the data point that would show you that they have a problem, that they likely have, and that they likely don't know about because they haven't mentioned anything about it so far. So the first step, I would say, what is blank? The second step is, in the first case scenario, we're giving them a stat to correct their misbelief. In this step, we're just giving them a stat to show them that the problem exists. But I use the same word. I'm like, interesting. They're like, what's interesting? I'm like, industry average is 15 to 25%. But anything below 50% email open rate, and statistically speaking, you just have an email deliverability problem. Only 59% are making it to the primary inbox. But as is, as is, there's a high likelihood of email deliverability problem. So I am essentially presenting to them that a problem exists by way of a stat. So let's do network latency for IT director, for instance. If I think that a misdiagnosis, meaning one that is a problem that they haven't, that is likely a problem that likely they don't know about it because they haven't even brought up network latency, I'm like, what's your network latency, if you don't mind me asking? And again, they're going to answer with a straight face or not know that it's a problem because, that's the point of the exercise, right? If they're like, or they'll answer with a very, sincere response of like, not worried at all. They're like, it's 432 milliseconds. I'm like, found one. To Jay Frank's point, I'm like, found one, but I'm not like, you're a dum-dum. I'm like, whoa, your network latency is a problem. I'd say interesting. And they're like, what's so interesting? Like industry average is less than 100 milliseconds for network latency, top 115. But anything over 200 milliseconds for network latency, statistically speaking, is causing a 42% increase in server downtime. And it's so fun when you get to the end of the statement because you watch all the math flip, not only in how they see you, but in their confidence in solving the problem. Like, all of a sudden, you've just given them an unknown, and they're like, "Wait, what?" Because all of a sudden, they have a teammate. They have someone who's helping them, you know? And so not only does it reverse in how they see you, like, yes, but that's not the goal. The goal is not how they see me. The goal is they start writing down with their pen notes, because they should be, because this stuff it can actually really help them, actually really help them. So the second step is I'm giving them the stat that shows them what I'm looking at. It's essentially like, think of it when the doctor puts the x-ray on the screen. When they put the x-ray on the screen, you still know nothing. But then when they're like, do you see this right here? And they point something out and they show you what that means. They're like, typically speaking, anything, it will look like this. You can see in this quote unquote normal graph. But you see how yours is bent about 90% to the left? That's what's causing, in the short term, that's going to be no problem. But in the long term, anywhere from 3 to 6 months, and you're going to see like immense increase in back pain, for instance. So their expertise is they're showing you what to watch out for. But the first thing that they're doing is putting the data and the statistics up for you to see. They're not saying, I think. They're saying, do you see this? And I know that I've told the story a couple times, but I didn't know my gums were receding because I brushed my teeth 5 times as a kid and hard. I didn't know that. Still no pain in the present. They'd asked me to get an electric toothbrush time and time again. And I said, no, 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 because I had had so much surgery on my teeth as a kid. And one time they did it without numbing my teeth. So I went through an entire surgery feeling everything as a 9-year-old girl in a room alone. That's crazy, right? And so they wanted me to buy an electric toothbrush and I wouldn't do it. I'm like, keep your voodoo device away from me. Until the most recent hygienist said, have you thought about an electric toothbrush? I was like, yeah, I don't want your voodoo electric toothbrush. She's like, got it. Well, they told you that you need one. They haven't shown you why. And then she put up graphs of my gums. She's like, here's your gums 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 1 year ago, and today. You have brushed so hard and so much that your gums are receding. They have been for a very long time. And if you keep brushing like this, your gums will be gone in your 40s, which I turned 40 on March 1st. She's like, your gums will be gone in your 40s. And at that point, there's nothing we can do. They don't grow back. You don't regenerate them. She's like, so we can do 2 things. We can graft gum at that point off of the top of your mouth, graft it in around your teeth. It can be incredibly expensive, incredibly painful, and take about 3 months recovery time. Or we can graft in gums from somebody else's mouth, which is a hard no for me. And I'm on the point of tears. I'm like, or what? She's like, are you getting an electric toothbrush? Stop brushing so hard. And so I bought one that night because she showed me with the pictures. So misdiagnosis, that's what you're doing. You're saying the first step, instead of them defining what they said for their belief, it's defining something that they haven't talked about that you think causes a problem. Like, what's your network latency, if you don't mind me asking? Step 2 is, if it is in the range that it causes a problem, that you're like, interesting. They're like, what's interesting? You're like, statistically speaking, the industry average is less than 100 milliseconds to 115 for network latency. But anything over 200, you're going to see a 42% increase in server downtime. And then the third step, you can either a question that helps further your, add a different element to the diagnosis, or to double down that the misdiagnosis that you found exists. So it's the same type of thing, they didn't know that they have this network latency issue. So I'm like, what's your network storage capacity, if you don't mind me asking? So it's helping me double down that my misdiagnosis exists, or it's adding to the pie. But the either case scenario, you're asking in both of these cases, the first question, you're asking them to define it. The second step, you're presenting the truth with the stat. And the third, you're asking a question to either double down on the confirmation that you have that it's not true, or that it truly exists when they didn't know about it, or an extra element of what it is versus what they believe that it was. We're going to go straight into the next lot, men. No riffraff, no talk. Okay, 9 worst questions. These are going to be relatively rapid fire. This is going to be a fun section because I'm just going to let everyone. People don't like me, just generally speaking across the board, which I get. I'm not likable. I like books. I don't like personal brand. I don't like the junk. I don't like to talk. I like to read. I'm just not likable. I'm really not. The stuff I'm into, y'all. I mean, as a reminder, I went on a you can tell me 5 sessions, 6 session, each one for 2.5 hours, rant on Stranger Things, the show, 2.5 hours a piece. And I was like, fine. I was chilling. I was like, I could keep going about a TV show on Netflix. Conformity gate's still real, y'all. Point being, but people are really not going to like me after this section. Okay, so these are all the questions. I'm going to do 11 instead of 9. The questions that I see most commonly asked that are just terrible, terrible, terrible questions asked. I don't care who tells you to ask them. It's bad. They're wrong. they're just wrong. These are bad questions to ask. Will shut down your buyer. It doesn't help further your diagnosis. It's all from the same root of crap pot, in my opinion. How can we manipulate people to get them to say things or believe things so that they should buy because it's an advantageous place for me to get them? And you can put as much perfume and smile on this as you want, but it's all the same thing. It is all the exact same thing. So, okay. First is a self-diagnosis question. A self-diagnosis question is asking them what they believe and then tying your belief to that. What's the impact to you if you don't move forward? What are the ripple effects of staying as is? So what's the root cause of this? What's making this happen? So you're asking them what they believe, and then you're anchoring down on that. So you have to keep in mind, the only value of a discovery call is the difference between what you believe. Shay Frank, you're my only friend. I take that back. Kirsten's in here too. And Robert. Y'all three are my friends. So I'm like joking. Okay. Self-diagnosis question is asking them what they believe and teasing out that data point and then anchoring your opinion to this. This is what most sellers do. They're like, what's the impact to you of not moving forward? I'm like, Brendan, if they know that and they're correct, they don't need you and they don't want to answer that question. And I don't freaking blame them. It's a waste of time at best. And they know where you're going. They know that you just want that information. You want that juicy current state and future state so you can justify your pricing. They know it. And I'm proud of them. I'm proud of them for knowing that. So it's self-diagnosis question is asking them what they believe and then anchoring there. Now, the only self-diagnosis question you do need is in the beginning. What are they in there to solve? What's the driving impact? Or a reasoning question. You're like, why do you say that? So you know it to blow up. But past that, especially multiple in between one another, I mean, it's just bad. Digital questions. I hear trainers say this one too. Okay, digital questions are asking them if they have the problem or not because you want to sell to them. Do you have problems with low open rates, low conversion, long sales cycle? Do you struggle with open rates? And you're essentially asking them, do you have this problem? Waiting for you to say yes, which our buyers know where we're going. They know where we're going. They know, y'all. They know. They're not dumb. It's so obvious. So you're like, do you struggle with blank? They know you're waiting just for them just to say, why, yes, I do. And then you're like, oh, okay, cool. Well, let me show you. Let me open up the coat with all the watches. So if I want to hypothetically sell, all I need to know is digitally, do you think that you have this problem? If I need to help you solve, I need to know a lot more stuff. And that's the catch-22. I don't see people asking for the stuff because they're not after solving it. The buyer knows that, so they start to shut down. Okay, question number 3, a leading question. This is any question where you're trying to lead them to an advantageous spot to say something so you can get them to go somewhere because you think that it's advantageous to you in terms of their proclivity towards or propensity to buy. So a good litmus test for this is when you ask a question and they're answering, if you're busy thinking of your next question, you're leading them somewhere. Or if you're, after they answer, you can't remember the information, or you're not taking notes, or your diagnosis and questions aren't changing based on what they just said. All 4 of those will show you that they're leading questions. Essentially, I don't really need the information. If I'm just trying to lead them somewhere, I don't really need the information. Like, let's take the worst type is COI selling, for sure. It's my least favorite type of selling. It's the most malevolent. It's the most snaky, in my opinion, because it looks the most correct, meaning it looks like you're after helping them when you're truly in your gut not. I don't need the information of what you think the cost of inaction is, which again, you're doubling down on what they think the cost of inaction is so that they say out loud and calculate that out loud so they feel like they should buy more. I don't need that information to accomplish my goal if I'm just trying to lead them somewhere. I just need them to say it. But if I actually want to help them solve it, I need all of that information, right? So a good litmus test is if you're not writing things down. It should be very important to you, the information that they're saying. Why? Because you're going to help, it'll help you solve it. Subjective questions. This is another one that I hear trainers booting out a lot. High, low, good, bad, effective, ineffective. Do you struggle with low open rates? I'm like, Brendan, what's low? Low to you is not low to them. The low to them might be, low to them might be actually high and cause a problem. But you won't know that data point unless you get them to say what the objective data point is. So again, the goal is to sell, not to solve. So thus the problem ensues. You can tell a trainer by how they recommend an elevator pitch. That's where you can really tell what they believe. So if they're talking about like, hey, so do you have good or bad? Do you struggle with high blood? I'm like, because where you win is where they win, is by finding things that they don't know. If someone comes in and the doctor asks, they're like, do you smoke? The person's like, yeah, but just a little. The doctor does not stop. They're like, what's a little? How many? When was the last time? How many? Well, I quit quite a while ago. I only smoked for a little bit. It was just I was stressed because my mother-in-law moved in. It's like, how much was a little? How long did you smoke? How many packs a day did you smoke? Because that might cause a problem that they don't know about. And what's a little to them actually causes a problem. And the difference between what they believe it's not causing a problem, and it actually does cause a problem. That difference is where we add value. So to understand that, if that's our goal, we can't take good or bad. We're taking, is it or high or low? It's what's the number? I'll tell you whether it's good or bad. And I'm not telling you that as a, verbose, over courageous, we need to learn the information that it's like, I'm confident based on the amount of information that I've learned that I'll be able to tell them something that they don't know based on the expertise that I built, based on information, not off of conviction. So, okay. Subjective questions. So anytime an adjective or adverb exists, it's bad. Pain questions. This is just getting them to talk about their pain. I'm going to be quick about this because I don't see it that much anymore, but it's basically just asking them about their pain and details of that pain and then stopping there. They're like, oh, well, we're really bad in terms of quota attainment. And they're like, oh, yeah. And I see the seller like perk up. They're like, oh, yeah. How bad? How long has that been going on? What are the ripple effects on? I'm like, and there's the self-diagnosis question. What are the ripple effects on your home life? Are your kids going to think you're a big fat failure at Thanksgiving because you can't get to quota? Here's the real kicker. They're like, have you done anything about it in the past to try to absolve it? Has it worked? I'm like, Brendan, they're in front of you, which means no. You just want them to say that. Getting too spiced up. Okay, blaming questions, where you're asking a question to blame something on them. Are you the type of leader that wants to help their team or leave them out? That's in terms of quota. Confirmation questions. Okay. I'm going to end on one. I'm going to go a little over on this one. Okay, if questions, anytime you're saying if, you have to stop and ask a more direct question. If you're selling into Mia, are you selling into Mia? If you're thinking about going to speed skating later, are you thinking about going to speed skating later? But the last question that I'm going to end on, confirmation question. I'm just going to blow it up because I see it a lot in the market, which is, what makes me know we need, in my opinion, we need help. It's just us, y'all. Meaning the trainers I'm putting in the fire here. The confirmation questions is getting a buyer to confirm something so that you can get them somewhere advantageous. Can we both agree that bull? So it's essentially a way to, you can't build an argument unless you have solid ground on something. And if it's something subjective, you're trying to get them to agree to this so that you can build based upon that. Horrible. There's just an agenda behind it. Can we both agree that quota attainment is hard enough? Can we both agree that the principles of a good leader comes down to how often do they coach? And you're just trying to get the person to say, yes, we can agree that. Okay, good, because now let me go into how you can coach more often with X, Y, and Z, all the products that I saw. Here's the thing. This is what I'm going to say about this. And then we'll go into the last piece and we're done. Lawyers and doctors both ask questions. Doctors, it's to diagnose. Lawyers, it's to get the person to say something so someone else believes something. That's sales today, is lawyers. And out of the two of them, that's the more sleazy, for sure. I hope that the sales of tomorrow, maybe even if just by 1%, is the questions that a doctor is asking. Now, a doctor might be wrong, but at least the intent is there. If you're always going to be wrong when you're asking questions like a lawyer, and even if you're right on accident, right? Oh, I was trying to lead them somewhere and accidentally I helped them, and that's good and great. We've got to reposition to, and until we do that, till we make that change of our North Star, no technique will work. And I'm happy about that. Nothing will change in sales. They'll always see us as sleazy because we are, until that has changed. Until that has changed. Now, us having the ability to be able to diagnose through asking better and better and better questions will help us find bigger and bigger and bigger unknowns and be more and more and more accurate. That's based on the amount of information that we learned about the buyer persona beforehand, which is certainly something to go into. However, until that agenda changes, honestly, there's 42 different definitions of sellers on Google. 41 of them are negative. And I'm like, I think 42 should be negative. That's my true assessment. Because I'm like, look at all the questions that we're asking. They're riddled with self-agenda. And you want me to justify that we are not after our own number one? We are today. We don't have to be. And that's the point. So all of these questions, the main culprit behind it, the cathexis, the fulcrum of it, is instead of me, for a second, put it down, put you down, and focus on them. What is good for them? What do they need to solve? What do they not know? What do they not know that's going to hurt them? What are they about to do based on something that they believe that's not true? They believe that there's, not gravity. Gravity doesn't exist. They believe that this field is 100 meters long when really it's only 5 meters long and they're about to fall off a cliff. Can I catch that? And how often can I catch that? And when we do, our numbers will increase, even if we're just focused on us. Meaning, even if that's what you really want, the way to go about it is to help them. So, okay, last lap. Men, do we have one? How do I adapt questions for inbound, outbound for a cold call? Okay, this is the last thing that I'll say. Questions, these are the 3 use cases. So inbound and outbound, the difference is not the necessity or the need or the responsibility to diagnose. What does change is the urgency of what you're trying to catch and the nature of what you're trying to catch to help them. In inbound, what you should be scared of is action that's incorrect because they're about to take one. 35% of people who come inbound close, and only 6 on outbound, not because the seller's better, worse in one case scenario. It's because they're convinced that they have a problem. They are much closer to making an action with inbound. They've already started to solve it. So what I'm trying to catch is keeping that in mind, that they are about to make a movement to do something. Is what they're about to do correct? And is it going to net out in what they believe that it's going to net out into? And is it going to help them solve the problem? If it's solvable? That's what I'm trying to correct through that diagnosis. An outbound lead, the thing that I'm trying to correct or catch for them is that they are inactive right now, and that is correct. And inbound, you're trying to correct hypothetically. You're trying to double down and make sure that what they're about to do is going to actually solve the problem, because you have a recognition that they're about to take action. Outbound, you have the recognition that they're not taking outbound, or they're not taking action, and they likely aren't going to take action in the future. And your understanding, is that correct? Is there something that they don't understand that exists, that they actually need to be moving about but haven't yet? That's outbound. So the responsibility to, hypothetically, the use case doesn't change. I mean, discovery is discovery is discovery is discovery. What you're after is misdiagnosis and misdiagnosis. That's when you win, that's when they win, blah, blah, blah. However, the two different types of flavors are, number one, you have to keep in mind in inbound, they are about to jump off that cliff. They're much more ready to jump off that cliff. And so what you need to catch is, are they about to, yes, are there things that they're not thinking about, or that they don't know that they should be mobilized about? Maybe. But the priority for right now is they're about to jump off this cliff. And it's is that the right movement to do? I kind of think about this in regards to, sometimes I have a hot head. You couldn't tell. I don't think you could tell, generally speaking. And it takes me a lot to push me over, a lot. But I have a hot head. They called me Headlock Holland in high school because I put a girl in a headlock. I played soccer. I wasn't exactly the most even-keeled soccer player, and she was attacking my goalie. So I had to go in front of a board. I'm like, I'm sorry, I put her in a headlock. But we're all clear about who can attack the keeper now, are we not? We're all clear of that. When I'm going into, there's been oftentimes when I'm with my family or something, and they do something that's not great, but then someone does something that affects them, and in my head I'm like, you sit down, I'll handle you in a minute. And I'm like, but that's what we're going to talk about right now. We're going to hash this out. When I'm thinking about inbound, that's how I'm thinking about the priority. Then I'm like, are there things that they don't know that essentially might hurt them in the future? Yeah, for sure, maybe. Then I'm like, Mimi, so my mom, I'm like, you sit down, I'll talk to you in a second. I'm going to handle you in a second. And I'm like, we'll get there. But the first priority is they're about to take an action. Is that correct? Is that going to hurt them? Is that not going to hurt them? What are they about to do? Before I get to the outbound, I'm going to get to meaning before I get to the things that they might not know about that they should solve. So it's not a difference hypothetically in the goal, but in the nature of the call, that's the difference. Here's something that I do not recommend doing. I do not think that schluffs your responsibility to ask questions. I do not think that schluffs our responsibility to diagnose or find things that they don't know. I don't think that means that we should meet them where they're at, meaning they've gone really far through the buyer's journey and that we need to just give them pricing and move out of the way. Like when people say we need to meet them where they're at, I'm like, I look at that and I see a classic misunderstanding of what our role is to begin with. The reason they want pricing is because they know that they're going to have to solve the problem without us. So they've done so much research that they feel like they're as ready as they can be without an expert. They wanted an expert in you, but they didn't get one. So they're as ready as they can be. So now they just want pricing from you because you don't have an expertise. That's not meeting them where they're at. Well, technically it is, but it's like I put someone in a bad situation and now I'm going to meet them where they're at, that even though they're in that bad situation because of me, I'm going to help them continue and further down that road. Instead, when they come in, I'm going to meet them where they're at, meaning I'm going to meet them where they're at to slow them down from an action because it might not be the correct one. Whereas outbound, I want to find things hypothetically if they're not moving, but when hypothetically they should be. The only difference between that and a cold call, and then we're done. Cold call, it's the same goal, but it's just in a shorter time frame. Cold call and discovery call are the same exact concept. It's just in shorter time frame. Cold call, you have minute and a half to 5 minutes. I would say if you can find one within the first minute, you're good. Meaning they'll give you more time. So I need to find an unknown much more readily, much more quickly, et cetera, on a discovery call. If they're on a discovery call, it's for a reason. Either they have self-researched or someone else has found an unknown for them, or you're right place, right time, but there's some backing to it. Cold call, you've got 30 seconds to a minute. And the difference between you and every other cold caller is every other cold caller hasn't found something they didn't know, and they think you're the same unless you find one. So you have to find one quick. So if you can find one in the first 30 seconds, that'll give you the next minute and a half. If you can find two and one in the first 30 seconds and another one within the next minute and a half, I'd argue that they're ready to jump on a discovery call, because what they learned is that they find out information of what they didn't know when they spend time with you. And that if they extend that call on a discovery call, if they give you more of their time, they get more of what they had in this last 5 minutes. If you don't find anything they didn't know, they don't want to extend that experience by giving you more time for no win. But if you find an unknown, then they're more willing to give you time to extend that experience. In their head, they're like, even if I don't buy, I'll learn something about how to solve my problem. So from a selfish perspective, they're like, I want to do that. And that's a fine place to be. That's where we essentially want them to be, that they come to us to learn how to solve the problem, not to just buy the product, because that's ultimately what creates trust and credibility and makes them trust us as a partner to buy from us long term. That's it. Lap 6 was shorter than I thought. US is bringing home the gold at the time where I was short on lap. Thank you, everyone, for coming. That was a heated session. That was probably our longest session to date. That was day 12, right, men? Is that day 12? I'm going to figure skating again tonight. So tonight, I think is the last night for figure skating, or the second to last. It's the last night that I'm going to figure skating. It is the women's finals. And yes, annoyingly enough, I'm going to be in front row again. I do not know what happened, but I have front row tickets from here on out. So I'm going to be in section B24. If you want to look for me. So I believe that that's basically, there's two sides. There's the announcer side, and then there's the side with the skate girls who essentially go around and pick up the stuffed animals and da-da-da. But basically where you see all the computer like TV announcers and computer announcers that are sat there. If you're looking at them dead on in the right-hand corner, I should be there front row. So I don't know what I'm going to wear. If y'all want to tell me what to wear so you can look for me. If you are watching, I might wear red hoodie, might wear, who knows, maybe I'll stick with my trusty Mets hat. But anywho, if you're tuning in, that's where I'm going to be tonight. Tomorrow, we're going to pick up from a content perspective. We're going to switch back to prospecting. And we're essentially going to go to, let's see. Ooh, this is nice. Cold email. Tomorrow's cold email. It's a big topic. We're going to go really deep in prospecting. This might be the biggest prospecting topic. So now that we're heating up in terms of discovery questions, we're getting into that. Now we're going to do cold email. So I will see you tomorrow for cold email. Thank you for the time today and for going a couple minutes past the hour. Now we have the setup. So, you know, no more trying to figure things out from here on out. So I'll see y'all tomorrow. And if you have time and you are watching figure skating, look for me tonight, B24. I'll be the front row, and I think I'll be in a Mets hat. Okay, thanks for tuning in. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye.